Thank you very, very much for committing a good part of your evening to being with us. This is the second of our Hope Forums, and it's an opportunity for the European Evangelical Alliance family and friends to gather together to look at a topic. And this evening, we've got a really good one. So it's Walking Together in Times of Polarization, Part 1, which implies that there is a Part 2 or 3, which I don't know about. But Part 1 is politics. And let me just read you the blurb that was on in the invitation. Polarization, so political polarization, creates an us versus them dynamic, which is hard to break and easily escalates ongoing tensions. As Christians, we are called to respond in love and not react in fear. Yet it is easier than we care to admit to be drawn into polarizing dynamics. It is difficult to carve out spaces for conversation where hostility is a default. How to navigate our current political polarization? How do we contribute to a healthy civil public square? So just in case you don't know who I am, I'm Julia Doxat-Purser. I work for the European Evangelical Alliance as the Socio-Political and Religious Liberty Representative. And I have the joy of chairing this evening and just make some introductory remarks and then we'll pray. So if I think about the last 15 years across Europe, politics has got a lot angrier. We have social media algorithms which create echo chambers of similar-minded people, and the views just keep escalating. Our language gets stronger, and too often it has become normal for insult, harassment, hate, death threats online, and definitely exaggeration of facts and lack of truth. People are getting hurt, people are getting angry. And the calmer voices withdraw. We don't want to play the game, so we withdraw. The nuanced and balanced opinions are not heard because it's not what the media is interested in. They like the big noise. Politics can seem like a boxing match with the political big characters having devoted fans who cheer when their man or woman knock the opponent to the floor. And then they look the other way when it's clear that their hero is cheating, is metaphorically pulling the opponent's hair or manipulating the judges in order to win the bout. If we look on social media, it seems that some Christians are definitely getting caught up in polarization. We join in with the nastiness. We ignore the uncomfortable truths about our political hero, our government, our side. And our moral compass alarm bell only works to alert us to the faults of them and not about our side. We switch off and we don't hear the alarm bells when our side is doing something wrong. Or we can be so focused on the justice of our cause that we don't notice that there are other important things that do actually need to be considered. But of course, the issues do matter. It's very complicated, but the issues do matter, and God cares. God is the God of righteousness and justice. So this evening, we've got three great speakers. We will start with Frank Heinrich, who's from Germany, giving the perspective of a politician. Then we will have Arie de Pater from the Netherlands and the European Evangelical Alliance's Brussels Rep, giving the perspective of a lobbyist. And finally, we will have Dawn McAvoy from the Evangelical Alliance in Northern Ireland, who will give the perspective of someone trying to push back against the abortion agenda by reframing the polarized debate. And then we'll have a time of discussion. So if you have questions, if you have thoughts, please be noting them down because we will want to hear from you. So I would like to ask, where have we got Frank? Frank, our esteemed president. Frank Hinkelman, would you please just pray for us? Unmute first.
Sorry, I'll do. Okay. Let's pray. Father, we want to thank you for the opportunity to meet on this technology. Thank you that while we are in different parts of Europe, we can still meet and see each other, listen to one another, Father. And we want to ask your blessing upon our time together and want to pray that we will learn something out of what we hear today, what we share and discuss today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay, let me just briefly introduce Frank. We asked how would they like to be introduced. So Frank Heinrich shared the following. He's 59, looking very young. He's married, father of 4 and grandfather of 7. For 5 years, he started working life as a social worker. He was then in the Salvation Army as a pastor, as an officer for 12 years. Then for another 12 years, he was a member of Parliament, the German Parliament. And now, since earlier this year, he's one of the directors of the German Evangelical Alliance. So, Frank, you are an alliance man and you are also a former elected politician. So over to you, please.
Good evening, everybody. Now, this is quite a challenge to put into a few minutes, and that's why I may use all 15, but maybe even less, and wait for the answers and questions at the end. Now, I learned one thing when there wasn't much political that I learned in school. Besides thinking maybe, but there was one line that my teacher said, seeing the speeches in the parliamentarian debate is the window out of which the speech is out of the window. That's what it was called. And now I was in that window giving speeches on the one side, and the media is putting this window very narrow. Many people in my constituency and around and fellow Christians asked me, why is this always so heated? And it's not. It's quite heated, but media puts it down to the real, let's say, bad stuff or the critical points. And even the fight of argument in an hour of debate about whatever subject, every party or every speaker has to put everything they have been doing in preparing that law and that paper or whatever into a 3-minute or a 5 minutes talk. Now, that's the difference to the other parties. And sometimes we as viewers have to understand that not everything is just like that. Now, and it is the duty of every speaker there that they have to put it down to understand the differences. I remember, though, that in the last years, there has been a change in the way of debating. You know, Germans try to be calm and try to be argumentative, and it's fine. But when the right-wing party AfD came to parliament, that was quite a difference in style, not just from them, but towards them as well. So 17, I remember the first debate that we had where the government and the coalition hasn't been sit in yet. And there was a debate that that we had to decide on how, yeah, I think it was Ireland, that they have to want to earlier give the money back to the EU. And then there was a heated debate. Then it got clear, the 3 that went for it. And then the AfD right wing and the Left Party voted against it together. And they found out now they have to be better in arguing, not just saying no to everything. That made a difference, but the yelling and almost spitting and the yellow cards that the Speaker of the House can give to speakers rose. And it wasn't, I remember the first speech of a young lady in my committee from the Liberals had a speech, and she was out yelled the whole time, the first speech, which hasn't happened before. Now, there's the other side. Often Fridays we have the prayer breakfast where the Christians from all parties meet, and 2 speakers of the House say that they sometimes can recognize by the way a speaker is doing his speech that he might have been at the prayer breakfast in the morning. So there can be a difference, and we have them from all parties. So, but really, to see the colleagues in the House, sometimes they have three faces. And the one face is the one that they have in the committee where you discuss and mostly fine. There's that one face they have when this window to the world is, and they have to, they are just like crazy. And there is the person you meet in the floor, in the hall, and just discuss something. But the outward reception in the world and the media is quite different. I do think that some of you know the movie The Social Dilemma. I would urge you almost to see it. It's a documentary, and it says that we all wish in our bones 7 times more negative stuff to hear and to see as we want to hear positive stuff. Now, hopefully the 19 of us have a different quota, but that makes it that a speaker that is yelling will be maybe in the news in the evening. I remember one of my colleagues that I, to that point, did not like, and his speeches were a bit, toothache, but he yelled at somebody, liar, whatever, at a minister. And I thought this is a quota or a moment that might be in the news in the evening. 20 minutes later, he asked for a word, which is possible in our plenary. And he said, and he got it. And he said, my team has given me an information that I didn't have when I was speaking. I was wrong. And as open as I said liar to that man, I want to say, excuse me, that I was wrong. Now, that hasn't been in the news in the evening. I think we have to teach people to discern what is happening there, because they'll take the same style, although this is not always the same case. I see polarization, and you said it has always been, and it is necessary. As I said in speeches, you have to make very clear what is my side of the story and not just wishy-washy. But I do see, not just since the AFD and the discussions about refugees, the discussions about Muslims have changed our society, and has changed the Christians, as I would say, as much as society. And there, I would love to have objection and would hear different kind of stories. I was 12 years in Parliament, as Julia said. After a year, my team and I started a folder, and we called it the puke folder. Now, we didn't write it exactly on it, but that was everything that came as email, letter, or whatever, under the belly line, or whatever you would call it in English. Just, you might look into the argument, but it was just threats, it was insults, it was the real struggle that I had. A year after that was when I skipped through it, and I found out the percentage of letters and emails in that puke folder of Christians in it was higher than the percentage of Christians in my society. And there, we don't make the difference. And that really hit me, because in my team, we had Christians and not Christians as staff members. And not just imagine a not Christian staff member seeing a brother or a sister talking to a brother the way they saw and read regularly. And I said, there are different feelings, there are different topics. I said too, it's refugees or it's Muslims. in the moment it is talking about democracy in general. Now in East Germany, we have quite a different stand in many opinions towards the war in Ukraine. And it can be topics like the ones that we discuss even in our Christian realm, towards society and abortion and death. I see, from my point as a Christian, as an evangelical leader, and as a former pastor, I see that this verse in Romans 12, 1 and 2 is quite not put in flesh and blood in many. Do not be conformed in this world, you probably know, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. I would love to see it in the way we argue. Not that we are informed, good, doing it as an argument against each other and not against persons. But I see more failing than processing it well. I even feel there is a not just in Christians, but also in the society, a threefold decadence happening. The one is, decadence, as we know, having much and not being grateful and stuff. But there is a mind decadence as well. We are not able already, or don't have the time, give it priority, to think longer than 10 lines, or around a corner, or wait for the other side until we hit it on. Facebook and co can make it very easy. But I see also a spiritual decadence where we just want to be secure. We want to stay with what we thought, that we get insecure with question marks from the outside. And that's not different than the world. I saw many Christians in Parliament, as my colleague that I mentioned, and he did that, by the way, a second time a few months later, where he made a mistake and asked for forgive me. And that, having said that, I remember a speech that I had in Parliament where I really had to be passionate, not against people, but what I don't want to see anymore. Even used a picture of the tearing apart of the Old Testament's mantles, when they mourn. And a few weeks later, I had an article about in the Mediterranean and the sinking ships and the dying people. And a Christian newspaper took part of that article. And about a few hours later, I had a death threat in my home, and the police had to secure me for some days. I never expected something like that. And I think we should, as Christians, tell the way they should think, speak about politicians in that case, and how to pray for them. I'll end with one story from my first day being elected parliamentarian. We had a party. I wanted the party anyway, even if I would have lost, because this is an adventure, with your team, with everybody. And we were having a little band from my church, and we even sang "How Great Thou Art" together in that forum there. Unbelievable. But then a Christian from the Evangelical Alliance walked up to me and said, "Frank, Brother Heinrich, we will now pray for you." And I was happy. I would have been more happy if he would have stopped the line there, because he added, "We will be praying for you in this lion's den." In German, it says shark spasm. Now, what is he saying? And what is he praying? I was thinking about that later. There's so much prejudice in that. He was saying, maybe you stay the way you are, but all others aren't. It's a shark spasm. It's a lion's den. It's, you know, non-Christian would have said they are all assholes. And this is the way they talk and pray to God about it. And I thought, this is unbelievable, because there is a mindset. If they pray for and we are ordered to do that for our leaders, for the people in power, and they think about an animal, you know, a bad animal, I don't know whether God can hear him. On the other side, I see so many that I don't know what they pray for me. Praying that I get out as soon as possible, praying for me that I don't become one, that I don't get bitten or eaten, or that I'm just a little sea star somewhere at the side of the basin, you know. But in the Corona crisis, I had Christians talk to me in a way that I never thought, and talk about the other leaders in a way that is worse than Nero, the old king were in Rome, you know. And that was really not just challenging. And I'd love to see more people going into politics, not just to experience that, but make a climate change there.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you for that challenge at the end. Oh man, yes, I agree with you. We'll move straight on to Arie. So most of you know Arie very well, but I'm just going to give you a bit of background that you might not have known. So at university, Arie studied agriculture. He then went to Russia, and that led him to then being concerned about religious freedom. And that's when his career direction changed dramatically. So he started working with Jubilee Campaign, and then with Open Doors, and then finally he joined the European Evangelical Alliance as our Brussels representative. He's married to Francina, and they have 3 grown-up children. And Arie he lives in the Netherlands, but is half the time in Brussels. He's in Brussels today. So Arie, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite a challenge to speak after Frank with his vast experience, because we are working in the same environment, and Brussels might be a little bit quieter as far as media is concerned. I had a discussion earlier this afternoon with some politicians from the Netherlands as well, where they say, okay, in the capital, the discussion or the media is way more present than here in Brussels, so that's a good thing. But much of what you shared, Frank, is still very much tangible here in Brussels as well. And it's a challenge, because freedom of thought, conscience and religion, and freedom of expression, and freedom of peaceful assembly, these are pillars of any democracy. And we want the political debate. We need it to share what we feel passionately about. And without these human rights, without these 3 pillars, we can't have any open political debate. And I think one of where it could easily go wrong is where we kind of put our faith at exactly the same level as politics. So politics, or any political party, is not a church. They have different responsibilities, and that gives us the freedom in politics to have a prophetic voice. It's not church, and we don't expect politics to be a church, but as Christians we have an opinion, and we feel passionately about what is discussed. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, that we use the freedom we have to have a prophetic voice, but politics is not a church. And of course, we want politicians to have ideals, to have clear opinions about what is a good life, and about the future of our economy, or our society, or our country. That's why they've been elected. But the problem of that is that social media, and especially, well, Frank already referred to that as well, over the last few years, social media, they promote strong opinions. And that's what we see in the political debates in Germany, in Brussels. And easy solutions are usually no solutions. But in the European Parliament, we have a few parties, and I think you have that everywhere in politics, that are single issue parties. So they are, they have their priority is European integration, or they are just interested in farmers' interest, or just interested in LGBTIQ integration, animal welfare. So these parties are elected just with one particular interest in mind. And that has an impact on the way they engage politics, the way they behave in any political debate. And that's important for us to know as a lobbying organization here in Brussels. So as I said, a frank and open debate is necessary for any healthy democracy, but this profiling gets in the way at times. So if you have just one issue, you are just about women's rights, or you're just about the integration of LGBTIQ people in society, that is the only thing that's is important and also in your reporting about what you do in politics. So you will highlight these issues, and that's how people, your electorate, will also evaluate what you've been doing in the political arena. As a result, the room for compromises is decreasing, and to me, politics is the art of compromising, striking the right balance between your ideals and what is kind of politically feasible, what is possible. But if you have just one issue, if you have one mandate from your electorate to achieve just that, then the room to negotiate decreases, and that's what we see very much here in Brussels, and I think in politics more in general over the last few years. And what I noticed is this role of social media. You see people just walking into the room, delivering a very strong statement that is recorded and then put on social media, and then they leave the room. That's not a debate, and that's not creating an environment where you can negotiate. But for your electorate, you're scoring points. And as you said, Frank, the media is stimulating that kind of behavior. As you said, well, with your colleague who had a very strong statement and then had to apologize afterwards. That doesn't make headlines. Well, maybe in some press it does, but I think in general it doesn't. So in public, at least in the public phase of politics, you see entrenched discussions rather than a genuine exchange of opinions or positions. And just yesterday, I was attending a meeting here in Parliament about the, okay, how to explain that, depatholization of transgender and non-binary people. So it means that in the past, being transgender or non-binary was listed among the mental disorders. That's been removed from the latest version of that book, and now there's a call to have an opportunity to change your gender without any medical assessment or medical document. So there was a debate on that in the Parliament yesterday with the European Commission, and there was one MEP who was just asking questions, and she said, okay, but what we see these days, or over the last few years, is a sharp increase in numbers, in frequency of transgender people. How come? Do we know? What is the long-term impact of the hormone treatment that we provide? And then, in the end, there was one MEP who said, "Well, just as a last comment, the sharp increase in numbers is just because in the past, all these people were committing suicide because there was no space for them in society. That is, for me, was a really shocking statement towards an MEP who was just asking for some research into the numbers, into the facts that have been reported. And that was the first time in Parliament where I noticed that Christians were accused of being responsible for people committing suicide, and nobody came to her defense, and that was shocking. But that's the climate that I see increasingly also here in Brussels, and possibly even more so with European elections coming up next year. So that's the environment where we work, and what you also see is that the language is changing, and they try to corner you in very black and white colors, where in the past, and that's we will come back to that later, you had pro-choice or pro-life. Nowadays you have pro-choice or anti-choice. So you're no longer pro something, you're just against us. And in the European Parliament, there have been reports on the foreign funding of anti-choice organizations active in Europe. So they were trying to assess or to estimate the amount of money that goes into pro-life lobbying as a threat to our democracies. That's the climate, and if that's the climate, and you come into that arena with a Christian perspective, it's quite difficult. And of course, there's pragmatism. So yes, on one point they might be very strong, at the same time they do realize that on other issues they might need your support. Civil society organizations are increasingly labeled in for or against, allies or foes. So you're pro-migration or you're anti-migration, you're pro-life, pro-choice or you're anti-choice. So as a civil society organization, you're either a welcome guest or you're neglected. And what we saw, freedom of religion or belief is one of the issues that we have a keen interest in as a Brussels office of the EEA. And we had a special envoy on freedom of religion or belief outside the European Union. And one day he had the audacity to be in a panel with an organization that was well known for their pro-life position. That was a panel on freedom of religion or belief, had nothing to do with abortion, but he was severely criticized for just being in a panel with these people, and there were questions asked about whether or not he should have been there, and whether the mandate was indeed still something that we should support. That's just an illustration of how black and white the arena or the situation can be. There was a report in a few years ago, also with abortion involved, and there were strong opinions, of course, and that Matisse report was finally accepted, and we didn't expect otherwise. But I was shocked when Matisse shared from his heart how Christians were dealing with it. The responses he got from Christians, all the emails in the puke folder, as Frank called it, it was shocking. So yes, we may have strong opinions on a certain topic, but I don't feel that this is how we should behave. And I think that's the time for reflection that Frank also called for. As well, what's the direct impact on our lobbying here in Brussels? One of the challenges is that we have a variety of topics. So we also have a variety of audiences in the European Parliament. So on freedom of religion or belief, we want to we need some MEPs that are specializing on that topic. On freedom of expression, it might be some other people, and on artificial intelligence or migration, it's another subgroup of parliamentarians. And sometimes it helps to use human rights language, but in other cases, you just have to accept the consequences of being a Christian organization and having strong opinions on some of the issues that we feel strongly about. So there's this challenge. You need to be careful. You don't want to unnecessarily oppose people and shut the door. And at the same time, we want to be prophetic and be faithful to the gospel and to our Lord. So I call for your prayers for wisdom and for also for an open mind of the politicians. So what can we do about it? Because this is a climate. This is not something that is just limited to politics. It's also in our societies more in general. We've been calling for a civil public square for years, a place where we can just have a candid conversation about the things that we feel strongly about, whether we agree or disagree. But we want a civil square, a civil public square where we can all flourish. So one of the things that we are working on, and it is difficult, but we are working on an informal roundtable in the European Parliament and possibly beyond, where we bring people together, not because we want to mediate, but just because we want to help people to understand each other better. Why do you feel strongly about this? What are the arguments that are so important to you, and why? And also to build trust. It's difficult, especially in the midst of the busy political agendas, to get people to commit to a joint lunch with people they might not necessarily feel attracted to. That might be on the other side, political side of the political spectrum. But yeah, my experience, well, of course, I've been talking to MEPs also about this idea, and in one of these talks at the end, one MEP said, "Well, thank you. This is the first time that I really had a talk where that was challenging me to reflect on who I am, the way I do politics." And she really appreciated that. So yes, there is possibly a Christian way of doing lobbying, but then also I think there's a call on us as well as Christians. We shouldn't accept or promote easy solutions to complex issues, because usually these are not true and not possible. Use social media responsibly. So consider the message and the source. Is it really, because it's so easy to hit the retweet or the share button, but because there is some Christian language that that sounds familiar, but take the source into account as well. What is the kind of the hidden agenda behind it, and do you really support that as well? As a general rule, listen before you speak, and also think before you vote. Christianity is more than just one or two topics. The Christian, well, the biblical sense of justice is is a broad concept. Shalom is more than just one or two topics that you might feel strongly about. So that is something that we also as constituency, as voters, should do and pray, as Frank also said at the end of his contribution, his intervention. Let's pray. Pray for our societies, pray for our politicians, for wisdom and restraint.
Thank you very much, Arie. I want us to listen to our final speaker, and then we're going to open up to questions and debate. So Dawn she's going to give a different input because she's focused on a very specific area of politics and doing a fantastic job. So Dawn works for the Evangelical Alliance in Northern Ireland. She co-founded Both Lives Matter to invite church and wider society to imagine a people and place who value the life and health of women and unborn children and pursue the well-being of both. Both Lives Matter are committed to creating a pro-both ethos that affirms and supports women and their children, both pre and post-birth, in their community. Dawn believes that the church has a key part to play in telling a better story and creating better solutions for women, men, and families than abortion. And from a personal point of view, Dawn is married to Peter. They have 3 daughters who were all married in the last 2 years. That sounds expensive. And now she is a grandma. There's 1 grandbaby and another is on the way. So Dawn, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And please, over to you.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you to both of the previous speakers. I'm so glad that you framed that I'm sort of a one-trick pony. I work for the Evangelical Alliance, but I do solely focus on abortion. So when I was coming to this opportunity that I highly value, I feel very privileged to be asked. But for me, the polarisation in politics is all about abortion, but thinking about the context of the conversation and my role in that, our tiny part of that. I'm constantly reminded when we're trying to engage the church and individuals who aren't politicians and aren't lobbyists or activists, and maybe just are disengaged or silent, and they don't want to get involved in a polarized, contentious, sensitive issue. I remind myself and them that although abortion is a legislative issue, we all have responsibility for it. Politics isn't just about those who are in government as if they're out there and not one of us. They are one of us and we are part of them. People, lives, health and well-being, education and culture are governed and shaped by us, by those we vote for within a system that we either all help create or abdicate our responsibility for. So to some degree, on one level, everything is politics. And as we think of this political, societal, cultural space that we're living in that have been talked about, we know it's very heightened and tense, and there are issues, other issues that have caused those tensions, and they've been mentioned. But for me, I agree with Mother Teresa. I think there's a PowerPoint slide that maybe Emily is going to help share. If we look at the first slide, Mother Teresa said the greatest destroyer of peace is abortion. And it's one of the very few issues that I think causes such tension. The act of abortion is inherently violent, and the methods of abortion have never changed, although they're more sanitized and medicalized now. Every abortion terminates a life. Many women are harmed by it, and many relationships are irreparably damaged. When we come to this subject as Christians, we know that there's a spiritual battle. And when we think of the greatest destroyer of peace being abortion, we know that the the great deceiver is behind that, challenging God's created order and design. It's a violent act. It's a contentious, sensitive, and emotional subject. It polarizes people, the people that it impacts and involves at a micro and macro level, the individual, personal, and societal. If we could look at slide 2 just quickly, Emily. Do we accept the starting point of the prevailing pro-choice abortion culture that tells us a woman and her baby are in opposition? They're in a tug of war. And in this game, the rules are stacked. They can't both win. For one to win, the other must lose. One must always end up in the dirt. And if you're pro-woman, that means the baby must lose. Do we accept that narrative, or do we challenge that framing and refuse to play that game because we have a different starting point, one where both lives in pregnancy always matter? We recognize that they're uniquely, biologically, and relationally intertwined, and believe that what's good for one is good for the other. So there has to be a way for both to win. If we think back to that quote, the greatest destroyer of peace is abortion, and we think about it in the context of a spiritual battle, which is countering God's design, we can think about the voice of feminism that prevails, that is pitting women, against their unborn babies, against men, that's splitting society, polarizing opinions and views. It's defining rights and freedoms for women in abortion. And those rights and freedoms are determined by abortion access. Across the Western world, we've seen the introduction of a legal basis for and a cultural normalization of abortion, and an increasing acceptance of extreme pro-abortion ideologies. And abortion is now being presented as an amoral, unquestionable choice, or even a supposed human right. And anyone who disagrees with that is put in the discriminatory, oppressive, angry, nasty box. But those pro-abortion ideologies dehumanize women and destroy relationships. They dehumanize unborn human beings who are being removed and excluded from legal protection and status and the public conversation. A very sad picture of human relationships and interactions has been painted that portrays powerful male leaders in the political sphere, church and family as wanting to control, possess, oppress and limit women's lives and bodies with pregnancy. And in this portrayal at its most reductive and extreme, men are always the powerful oppressor and women are always at the mercy of their biology. The very natural state of pregnancy is pathologized and unborn children are viewed as parasites. And the escape from this control through pregnancy is abortion, which must be unlimited and unquestioned. Abortion is presented as the default solution and cure-all, and women who cannot choose abortion are victims. Therefore, the people who are wanting to restrict abortion are seen as the oppressors. The prevalence and acceptation of these pro-abortion ideologies impacts those who are leading us into and forming the shape of our future societies. Any questioning of or opposition to these pro-choice abortion views is increasingly unacceptable, even seen as immoral. Whenever we refuse to see balance or seek common ground in this space, abortion becomes a political football. It's all about votes and populism. It's an ideological war where context is forgotten, balance is lost, integrity is sacrificed, human beings suffer, abortion rates increase, and valid alternative and real choices other than abortion aren't provided for. In academia and education, for example, in the areas of medical science and social sciences, ideology is trumping empirical facts. Science is denied when life begins, how it develops, how it's ended, and that intentional strategy to deny science and facts impacts on language in the public space. So it's a baby when wanted, but only pregnancy tissue or a clump of cells when unwanted. And culture changes to the degree that what was once immoral or a rare and tragic necessity is now framed as amoral, is promoted, demanded, and expected without limit. The zealous pro-abortion agenda rejects data or information that questions the impact of pro-choice abortion policies and laws, and anything or anyone that humanizes life before birth or shows that laws restricting abortion save lives faces aggressive reaction. Even the church has been impacted by these extremes, and many struggle to know how to respond effectively and to speak into this with compassion. Some studies suggest that abortion is as prevalent in as outside the church, and church leaders and parishioners don't know how to respond or speak. We look to the US, and a generalized critique is that their being actively pro-life is unhelpfully used as a litmus test of faith in politics. Churchgoers and politicians alike choose a side, whether they're for or against abortion, to give and garner votes and power from a potential lobby. There's a messy intertwining, and women and babies in crisis aren't always helped. Or if we look to Europe, including in the UK, the dominant reaction within the church is often to be silent beyond certain activist groups and individuals. The public conversation is avoided, and even in the church, there's a silence. Abortion isn't taught on or spoken about, and political activism on the subject can be rejected because we don't want to get drawn into that really unhelpful debate that maybe can be seen to be a barrier to Jesus being portrayed, seen, and heard. And again, women and babies in crisis aren't always helped. For the church, a beautiful and rich theology of God's incarnation and the value of every life that would lead to positive and life-giving social and political action has, in some places, been lost. For Christians or anyone just going with the cultural prevailing norms and without intentionally thinking the issue through, when you're faced with an abortion in a personal situation, you can find that you're pitted against yourself and your own conscience. You don't have the tools to make the decision. You're ideologically pro-life, but you're situationally pro-choice. You're pitted against yourself. Friends and family are divided. As Both Lives Matter, we wanted to speak into that whole space, the contested, nasty space, and we saw space for something new. When we think about abortion as a destroyer of peace, individuals and society, and when we think that society has failed to deal with this issue well, and women in pregnancy crisis have been unfairly and unjustly put into this game, which is like a tug of war based on a failed social model for over 50 years, and now we see the abortion culture war is getting more extreme and violent, we know that we can and must choose better. Slide 3, please, Emily. We want to reframe, reclaim, rehumanize, and redeem. We want to reframe the debate. We're pro both. We're pro both women and children, born and unborn, always and in every conversation talking about both, refusing to be put in one camp or the other because both lives matter. And we want to reframe the debate to include men because men matter. Men and women co-create. So we hold both to a higher standard personally and relationally. This isn't just about trusting an individual woman to make a choice. We include more voices because a societal response is required. The answer is bigger than individual choice when established structures and systems prevent unborn lives being chosen or enabled and prevent both mum and baby living well together. We want to rehumanize the conversation. The three involved directly, the woman, the man, and the baby who is created by them, and the pro-choice or abortion voices we disagree with. Collaboration and common ground is vital to enabling the lives and the people involved and engaged to thrive. We want to reclaim language. We want to talk about who we're for, not what we're against. We want to redefine compassion, choice, and context to be pro both lives. We want to talk about women as mothers and the unborn as babies, reclaiming the language of fetus and embryo because they just mean offspring or an unborn human. We want to redeem the story for both lives, for everyone, and work for better solutions than simply no to abortion in law. So laws that protect lives, services that enable lives, a culture that affirms life. We want to see and respond to all the connected issues, going back before the crisis, responding and speaking into the crisis, and post the crisis, including post-abortion. We want to see better politics with better legislation and representation from female and male politicians speaking into this space, cross-party participation, because we know that although this is a political issue, it can't be politicized. We want to see better and wider church and civic engagement, people of all faiths and none, both sexes, all ages, with intentional collaboration. We want to see better for women and girls than some, and maybe the loudest female activists, demanding abortion as the sole determiner and definition of women's rights. Our campaign has seen the best of times, with partnership in our inception, collaboration in church, cross-denomination, Catholic and Protestant, from every denomination within the Protestant church, and across all the parties in Northern Ireland for a season. There was that roundtable engagement, which was so inspiring and encouraging, and we'll come back to that briefly. In the media, I know that there were conversations there, or some comments about the media's tendency to polarize and want extremes. We worked really hard to reframe how we were introduced and presented. We're not anti-choice, we are pro both lives, and we did succeed in some places and with some journalists. We know we've had local, national, and international impact, and the phrase both lives matter is now common parlance. There were specific challenges that we met with a core shared purpose, with hope for better. And then in 2019, the law was changed in Northern Ireland from Westminster, and there was an increase in polarising and fracturing in relationships. The hard stop of COVID meant that momentum was lost. The abortion activists became quite triumphalist. The space became nastier, and in the media, there was maybe a cancelling of a perceived need for balanced voices or alternative voices. In politics, we've seen a change with no sitting assembly in Northern Ireland, increasing activism at Westminster with pro-abortion voices, happily publicly announcing extreme abortion positions and agendas. And in activist groups, we've seen increasing tension in the pro-life space, a false battle line being drawn between abolition and incrementalism, which is all about strategy, not about the ultimate aim. And in the church, we've seen challenges to the theology. On the left, elements in the church saying that God is a God of choice and affirms abortion, and a reaction on the right, which has become more zealous and legalistic. So we need to go back to our core aims to bring balance and collaboration and common ground, but all framed in an understanding that God holds this, that there is a way, a truth, and a life, that God's created order is that we are all made in his image, unborn and born, male and female, and his human beings who bear his image all matter to him. So whether we are speaking about the unborn and about women and men, or to those we oppose, we always hold in mind that they bear God's image, and we want to respect and honor them as far as possible. We want to see the connected policy and legislative areas in politics and culture and in the advocacy space. We want to talk about what we're for more than what we're against. And the church is key to this, because the church has the better story. The church has a truth that we can speak with grace and love. And ultimately, we have to remember that God is in control and he's not in a hurry, which we can compare to ourselves, who are rarely in control and invariably in a hurry. We need patience and we need to trust God's timing, because he is the answer to the pain and the destruction of abortion. He is the answer that we need as the church to be able to provide to a society that is broken and polarized and struggling to offer better to women in crisis. And I'll just finish with this. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and love and self-control. And for us, as we speak into this abortion issue and the issue of pregnancy crisis and families who are struggling, we need to speak into a space that is very contentious and sensitive, out of a spirit of love, knowing that God is in control and we need to trust him. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. That was fantastic. And thank you to all our speakers. I feel challenged. I hope you feel challenged. We've heard 2 portrayals of what it's like in politics in Berlin and also in Brussels. And I think there was a strong plea for prayer for politicians and also for Christians like Arie. But then there was a real challenge of, are we Christians in our emails, our social media posts, our words, or at least our attitudes? Are we in the puke folder, the nasty folder, the hateful, exaggerated folder? Or are we actually silent because we're withdrawing, we don't like all the nastiness, or we're embarrassed, we're holding back? And Dawn just zooming in on abortion, perhaps one of the most controversial issues, sadly, that we face in Europe now, that we're silent because we're embarrassed and we don't know what to say, and we don't want to, it's all going to be awkward and difficult. And she challenged us that actually Christians have a better story. We really do have a better story. And she's seeking to model a very different way of doing politics. So that was my very quick summary of 3 fantastic interventions. So I would like to open the floor to questions or comments. We have 23 minutes. We could talk, I think, all night, but we're not going to, because we've all got to go to work in the morning. But yeah, does someone want to make a comment or ask a question? Yes, Matthias.
Yes, thank you first of all to all 3 speakers for these very insightful presentations, and very moving also at the same time. Dawn, specifically, thank you to you for this slide where you had these 4 little sentences: reframe the conversation, reclaim the language, rehumanize the people, and redeem the story. And I found it so interesting because you had developed those in the context of your specific project and your specific topic. But as you were speaking about it, I thought, aren't these 4 a very, very good answer to tonight's topic in general? Aren't they a good recipe for turning a hatred-filled conversation, a very polarized conversation, into a conversation again that really leads to well, understanding and the real conversation? So reframe the conversation, reclaim the language, rehumanize the people, redeem the story. I found that really inspiring. And this is more of a statement for the moment, but maybe I can also turn it into a question to Frank and Arie. Could this be a recipe? Could this be applied to some of the controversial and polarising topics that you had to deal with, Frank, and you continue to deal with in your current role, and that you also see, Arie, in Brussels? Thank you.
Frank or Arie, who would like to answer? You both can if you wish. Frank.
No, maybe you can remind me of the four. I don't have them in front of me.
Yes, it was reframe the conversation, reclaim the language, rehumanize the people, and redeem the story.
Yes, I didn't recall, sorry. But yes, that could be. If we don't say that our frame is the right one and make a full stop after that. You probably understand what I mean. We have to be careful in making clear statements and then discuss just from that point. Arie has told that we should listen. And sometimes by listening, we come to the point where some of our framing wants has to be reframed again, although not taking the standpoint away. I just to give you an opposite example of almost the same topic. I was speaker in the parliament for one topic around this in the worldwide context, and as I was closer to an organization that had the rumor and the prejudice being for abortion, Christians went at me and didn't hear what I said, not at all. They talked, I can hear it even today, you've been there, you've been sponsoring, and the organization never said that. And I was the speaker for them in some context, and they never did it. And I was, as the speaker, the controller for abortion topics. They just didn't speak anymore. So having a line of context from our side is very necessary. On the other side, in prejudicing other organizations and people that are around them is, it reminds me on Arie's listening. And these people came from the EEA, from the formal heads or the board. And this, I still don't know what I can do about it. So yeah, this is just a little hurt that I had with this, because yes, these 4 lines can be applied, but we have to be careful in making laws in our context out of it.
Yeah, and we need to keep listening and not jumping in and accusing and not making assumptions. Arie, do you want to add anything? You don't have to, it's okay. We have another question from me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that yes, we have to try to be different. I think that is our calling, to enter the debate with humility. And at the same time, it is an area where where there are certain rules and you can't just topple them overnight. So yes, we come into the debate with humility. We want to listen and to understand, and I think that is doing politics that way is we set an example. And I'm an optimist, so I still strongly believe that if we enter the debate with humility and civility, that there is still a good part of society that will know to appreciate that.
Thank you. I just, a quick comment, Arie, you made me realise that, yeah, when I was Brussels many years ago, that always trying to be, you know, humility and civility, loving your enemy. And then I remember an MEP being incredibly rude about evangelicals. And I was mad. I didn't say anything publicly, but I went storming back to the office, really, really angry. And then remembered the love your enemy and the requirement to have grace. And it is not normal to have love for enemies, and it's not normal to have and feel and show grace to those who are being horrible. And that's why, yeah, reminds us of our humility, that we can only do this with God's help, because it's really, really hard sometimes, and we do need to pray for our Christians on the front line. Alan, you said in the chat that you are from the Evangelical Alliance in Zambia, so you are most welcome. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, Julia, thank you so much. I'm excited to be part of this conversation. I'm from the Evangelical Church in Zambia, so that's a denomination.
Okay.
Also a pastor in a local church. I'm just coming out of a conversation in Geneva where Connie actually did a presentation, so that's what brings me to this conversation. I quickly have a question for, I think, for Frank. He made a statement about politicians having these mechanized and rehearsed speeches. And I'm thinking to myself, what is the best way to reach politicians so that they begin to tell the truth, you know, without shutting them off? I think the second speaker, Pet, also made some interesting statements that also I would love to follow on. He said, we need to be careful not to shut the door. Then he further said, we do not need to be swayed in promoting easy solutions to complex problems. So where I see it as an African, I'm thinking to myself, with all the complex problems that you have in Africa, in Europe, we have an overspill of these problems coming to the continent of Africa, and they are tied to aid. For instance, when you talk about issues of LGBTQ,
yeah,
you know, for you to get help, you need to promote gay rights. So as an evangelical Christian in Africa, how do I navigate around some of these complex issues? Thank you, Julia.
Frank, can you answer that in a couple of minutes? We might need a longer conversation, Alan, but yeah, Frank, go for you. Okay.
Yes. Now, thank you, Alan. First, I want to tell you, you had a little prejudice that usually all these speeches aren't true. Why, you know, how to get the speeches to truth. Now, I cannot look into the hearts of many others, and I see instrumentalized ones, and I see things that are wrong. But in 12 years in Parliament, I was never told what to say. Never. And I was able to get my speeches from my heart, my knowledge, my experience, my team that helped me to evaluate, and the former laws to the subject. And I don't know how many people do that. And sometimes a staff member might be more powerful in a certain area than the member of Parliament because he has no clue maybe, but that's up to him. Again, the ones that are shown, seen, and heard from Parliament and get it into the news are the ones that have lies in them or faults in them. So I would say to approach politicians and in a servant way, ask questions, approach them and saying, have you thought about this as well? I want to broaden your horizon or something like that. And knowing, in our case, that a typical parliamentarian has an 80 hours week, So not asking for lengthy talk. If he gives you more, then fine. But tell him, I like to have a phone call or a 20 minutes meeting, and be prepared. Be prepared in having listened to all what he already said about it, honoring him in that, knowing what has been running around as arguments in the subject, and put it down not just to 20 minutes, but to 12, and then have a discussion. It's in an honoring way, in a presenting way, in an asking way, and not putting bullets in, it is this way, why don't you? And this way, I think also in the LGBTQIA, whatever, topics, we have the possibility, or abortion. I remember I found out in the abortion issue through just a talk with somebody in a church, as I remember, an argument that stopped the whole debate of the right of abortion. It hasn't finished it yet, but because I asked a certain question to my colleagues, the debate in Germany got stuck, and it hasn't gone again on this. And that was just about, when do you think a child is becoming a child? And all these people that want more the right for abortion didn't agree in themselves. So we have to be wise, we have to be clever, we have to be knowledgeable, and we have to be humble, as Arie said, in how we approach these topics.
Thank you, Frank. We only have 10 more minutes, so Jan, could you make your comments or ask your question? And it will be probably the last one.
Thank you. First of all, good evening to all of you, and thank you, speakers that have given some really wonderful presentations. And I really want to join Matthias in applauding Dawn for what she brought up, and the 4 Aries are really very important, I think. But at the same time, I really
Yeah, we can't hear you. Can you take your picture off, which might help? Jan, are you there? Lost him. No. Jan. Jan, we're not getting this. Nope, stop. Stop. Sorry, folks. I'd love to see one of you answer this question. Jan. Oh, he's gone completely. Well, now he knows we didn't hear. He may be able to come back, but I as chair will just grab the attention for a moment. So I'm going to put in the chat some web addresses for you that maybe you can copy and paste them. So the first one, Both Lives Matter, is Dawn's website. If I'm sure you will have been interested in what she was saying, just being able to work on the issue of abortion in a different, positive, pro both ways, you can learn more. And I'm sure that if you want to learn more how to do that, she would love to hear from you. And then you've got 2, the peacebetweendialogue.com. Arie and I found ourselves caught up in doing something that ended up being too much hard work, but actually it was brilliant. We helped create a film to help people think about the issue of migration and asylum, because we realized that the debate is very, very polarized, but actually the best way of people thinking about the issues is to actually meet an asylum seeker. So the film has 3 friendships between a European and an asylum seeker. And then there is a discussion guide. And in fact, if you look on the website I think there are two kinds of discussion guide. There's a discussion guide that Christians can use to get people thinking about migration and refugees in a way that is completely open. So there is space for you to say, I don't like them and I'm afraid of them. And creating a space for discussion to be able to engage and explore your fears, etc. Obviously, you know, it's seeking to get people beyond those fears and those gut feelings. But I think we have on that website, there is discussion guides that are designed for Christians, and also discussion guides where it's just edited slightly, so it might be a broader conversation. So we really see that churches have got a place to create a space for discussion. And then finally, the Chart of Conscience is the website where you can find out a lot more about the civil public square that Arie was talking about, and there are resources there. So is Jan there? No, we lost him. So you can grab the space, Andreas. Andreas, what would you like to ask or say?
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for the great input that we heard from the three different perspectives. And I was wondering, with everybody being happy with the 4 restatements, because I want to challenge one of them. Not all, but one. And that is this reclaiming the language thing, because from other perspectives, I have recognized that so often when we try to reclaim something or go back in time, we are already on the loser's end. And so when Arie said something about this new platform that he wants to start with members of parliament or people of the offices of MEPs, I thought that is a great way of something new that is creative, that helps find a different platform, and not just something reactive that will bring us to, might bring us to a discussion that is not bringing forward the discussion, but defending kind of thing, defending the old meaning of language. I'm with you in the questioning of is it okay to just accept that the language is kind of reframed, and I mourn about that. But on the other hand, we will lose this kind of battle from experience, especially in the last 3 decades. And so I was wondering, maybe there's a different way of attacking this kind of a problem, and attacking, I mean, in a positive way and not in a military way. Maybe, especially Dawn, maybe I misunderstood you, so then just help me to get it straight, or maybe others have other ideas in this regard as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Dawn, do you just want to make a quick response to that?
Yeah, no, thank you, Andreas. And I absolutely get we're running out of time. And I think it is all about context, and it's very specific language that we're talking about reclaiming. And it is with a desire to be proactive rather than reactive. So for example, we continue to use the word woman and the word mother. We continue to use the word baby, but we reclaim the language of fetus and embryo using the Greek and the Latin, because they refer to the humanity of the unborn. So we want to reclaim the word choice so that it's not only talking about abortion. We want to widen the conversation. We reclaim compassion, even if we're saying we're restricting abortion, because we say that abortion can be misplaced compassion. So it is in the context of a conversation, but it is looking to rehumanize the language and reclaim maybe a humanistic angle that's being lost.
Thank you, Dawn. Fascinating. You can tell she's worked hard on this, can't you? That's just so clever, and something that we can work on. Yeah, Frank, just quickly.
Yes, just because you said work hard on this.
Mm.
And I saw that. I do think we have to really know that it is hard work,
Yes.
or we shouldn't open our mouths,
Yes.
you know, or we should shut up. And this just came to my mind, you know, we should be diligent enough and pair up. Democracy is about majorities and everything. It is, if we want to invest long run, much breath, you know.
Yeah.
I had all the quotes in all letters that sent out of the Quran, all that I checked in that book that we don't read usually, were wrong quoted, all of them.
Mm.
Now that disqualifies. We just have to be either shut up or do diligent, deep work.
Yes. Part of my job is to encourage Christians to get involved in politics and in public life and in society. But I often remind myself that the one thing worse than not engaging is engaging badly and dishonoring Christ in the way we do it and what we do. So we are always ambassadors for Christ. We should always be thinking of our gospel witness. We should never be doing or saying anything that will make it harder for someone to find salvation in Jesus. That doesn't mean staying quiet on the tough issues, but it does mean being really, really careful on the language we use and everything else. So thank you very much to our three speakers, our fabulous speakers, Dawn, Arie, and Frank. Thank you to all of you for making the time. I hope we will be reminded and encouraged to pray, and also that we do have a better story. We do have a better story, and let's be positive salt and light in the opportunities that God gives us. And I'd just like to, I'm going to put in the chat that we're going to have a no hope forum over the summer, but at the end of September, 27th of September, on Zoom again, we will be having part 2 of our Walking Together in Times of Polarization. And this time the focus will be faith and church. So you will, if you've got to this meeting, you will no doubt see the invitation on social media or in your inbox. Do look out for it and encourage other people to join. So thanks everybody, and have a good rest of your evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.